Toxin. I'm Denise O'Malley with You Define Wellness, and it's time for another Toxin Tuesday talk show with Meth Toxins Awareness Alliance and my partner here, Kathy McCarty, who's the founder of that organization. We thank you for joining us, and today we're going to be talking about remediation, and we have a special guest. And Kathy, you get the honor of introducing our guest today.
Thank you, Denise. It's great to be back. I'm excited to have Judy Sawitsky, one of the founders of WeCycle Environmental Consulting here on the Colorado Front Range. Judy has about 25 years protecting health and the welfare of others through solving complex environmental problems. She holds many certifications as well as part of multiple professional organizations. Judy, we're so happy to have you here to bring expertise to this very important topic of meth testing and what people can get an idea of understanding and how they can protect themselves, their families, their homes, and their lives. Thanks for being here.
Yeah,
thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're so glad to have you here. I'm going to jump in with a couple of questions. I know Kathy has a whole host of them as well. But Judy, first of all, I'm kind of interested here. How did you get into this remediation business and environmental hazards?
Well, being in the environmental field, it's so broad. Mm-hmm. Found things that were really important to me. And being a new mom and all, I felt like anything that families could be affected by, any of the contaminants that we have in our world was important to me. So my goal was to make a healthier place for people to live and, enjoy their lives.
So how do you get brought into the process? How does a homeowner, they don't just wake up one morning and say, I'm going to call Judy from WeCycle. How does this process work?
Most often, I have to give credit to the realtors who are aware of the problem with meth contamination. So with meth, it's such an investment for a purchaser or a renter moving into a new complex or a new house, that they're making people more aware of what can cause problems for them down the road. And so we get a lot of calls from realtors for mm-hmm. property transfers, being interested in knowing that their clients are moving into a healthy environment. Mm-hmm.
Now, is what you do required as part of the real estate transaction, or is this above and beyond?
It's above and beyond. I think the efforts right now are to get it to be a requirement. Mm-hmm. And I think that's important. I think so often I'm at the tail end of it, where we find out, a year later that a house is contaminated that this family bought, and then they're trying to backtrack, to recover what they've lost as far as their investment. But if it was a requirement that homes were tested, mm-hmm. We could get in front of it. Okay.
And you do the testing, not the remediation, or do you do both?
I have had the experience of doing remediation up in Montana, and be honest with you, I have to say that is a young man's job. So I just do the testing for Utah and Colorado.
What does that entail? Sorry, Kathy.
It's all right.
Yeah. What is the
testing or the cleanup?
Well, let's talk about the testing. That's your area that you're specializing in. What does that entail?
We go in and we look at the house and just from experience, trying to determine where the hot spots might be, mm-hmm. Rooms, bathrooms, so assess the environment. And then the samples are taken. We use templates, 100 centimeter square templates. Mm-hmm. We use either methanol or alcohol, depending on whether or not the rooms have evidence of being freshly painted. Mm-hmm. We take our swabs, put them in a tube, and they go off to the lab and get analyzed on a mass spec machine.
Okay, and the turnaround time for getting results back is what, typically?
It's a 3-day turnaround lab time.
Oh, Okay, it's a reasonable turnaround time. Okay, I wanted to set the stage for the questions that I know Kathy has that, and so Kathy, why don't you jump in?
Well, one of the things that I wanted to ask Judy, or to clarify, is you mentioned that you did remediation in Montana as well as testing, but here in Colorado, if I were to remember the regulations, the testing companies cannot also be remediation companies. There's an arm's length in that process. Is that correct?
That is correct. But
Okay.
Montana, you're considered a decon specialist, which includes doing the testing.
Right.
So,
And so there are a lot of things that I've learned in this process that will vary state to state. And so
Correct.
what may or may not hold true in Colorado may be different in another state. And then there's about half of our states in the nation that have little to no regulations at all, is what I've learned.
That's correct.
Would you mind briefly just summarizing the different types of the way people can test for meth?
There's the home test, which I refer to similar to a pregnancy test.
Right.
You know, if you get the little red line, you're pregnant. If you don't, you're not. So, and those are available online. One of the companies, Meth Lab Cleanup Company, is one that is a supplier for them. To my knowledge, a lot of home inspectors are using those tests. I have a lot of housing authorities that are using them, and if they get a positive reading, then they call us to come in and do an actual test. But, you know, in the effort for them to save money, they go with the home test first. And then we do our testing, of course, which is according to state regs. You know, which is one thing I have to say about when the regulation got changed, it kind of forced all of us into doing things the same way. So, you know, we have some agreement of how we're going to test, and without manipulating numbers and, you know, whatnot. So, you know, it kind of standardized the way that the industry is testing.
And so if that's helpful, thank you. If I were to remember, with the two different types of tests where you can call a certified meth testing company approved, at least here in the state of Colorado, there's a couple different types that you can do. One that would suffice in a transaction for real estate purposes. And then the other type, which I called around and spoke to at least a dozen different companies, including yours, that is called a preliminary. Could you go into a little bit of detail as how both of those could help prevent and protect somebody, and how they're utilized?
Well, the one that you were referring to, the real estate one that we do for real estate transactions, we call it a pre-check. And there are certain types of testing. Discrete testing is we'll do one swab, throw it in the tube, send it off to get analyzed. A composite is we'll take wipe samples from 4 different areas, put the 4 swabs in a tube, send it off, and get it analyzed. So when we do our pre-checks, we're basically doing 2 4-part composites, and that gives us an idea of whether or not we have something there to worry about. On the state side, a screening, we go in and we do those swabs, but we're doing one wipe per room. So every 4 rooms of a house would qualify as one sample, because that's a composite. If we know or have reason to believe that there was any kind of meth activity there, we'll do what is called a preliminary assessment, which is what we did at Kathy's house. And that is 400 centimeters square per room. So the screening will tell me that I have a problem, but I won't be able to tell you which of the 4 rooms was the problem. On a preliminary, I will be able to tell you this room's a problem, this room isn't, this room is a problem. So you get, you know, more for your buck if you do a preliminary, because I can isolate exactly where the problem is. The screening is just to kind of give you that warm, fuzzy feeling that you're moving into a safe house. So.
Yeah, and what I learned is, you know, once that particular tenant moved out, there were no signs at all that there was any activity. you couldn't smell it, you couldn't see it. It didn't present as a traditional home that methamphetamine had been manufactured. And yet I did take that, I did make that decision based off of the arrest report and what I learned was found there. So thank you for that thoroughness. But what I've learned is that you can't necessarily profile a neighborhood, a community at all anymore. Can you give us some idea how people can protect themselves based off of what they've learned and some common threads that you've noticed over the many years that you've been doing this?
Like what to look for, you mean? Or
potentially, or, in my case, there wasn't really anything more to look for to the average person who had come in. So what I learned is there was no connection between law enforcement and me requiring me to then test because of what they found in the home. Have you found that to be something that is common in other types of properties and people that you serve, communities or organizations that you serve, that there is an automatic connection?
There should be a connection between law enforcement and a property owner. There's been a few cases similar to yours, Kathy, where law enforcement knew there was a problem and doesn't let the new buyer know, kind of thing, or doesn't let the homeowner know. There's just this horrible disconnect there that, I don't know how to correct that kind of thing. And, as far as neighborhoods and, I could, if somebody says, oh, I want you to go to blah, blah, blah neighborhood. And I'll go, oh yeah, that's the meth capital of, Weld County or, whatever that might be. I can make those assumptions. I've been proven wrong, but more often than not, it's a for sure kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And, you cannot tell from the type of house that it is, whether or not there was meth use there.
Right.
So as a precaution, in a new real estate transaction, you're buying a new property or you're moving in to a rental house, perhaps. It's a smart thing to do to at least get the preliminary test, but what does something like that normally run?
Preliminaries are the higher end.
Okay.
Sit off of square footage. So you're looking at maybe $1,250 for our time.
Mm-hmm.
I did a 5,000 square foot house yesterday. So rather than being of the $825 variety and plus sample, anything, it takes me 4 hours and you're charging for my time,
mm-hmm.
Completion of the report, and then a per sample price.
Mm-hmm.
What really drives it is the square footage and how many samples are necessary to get the job done.
It seems to me it just kind of makes sense. If you're buying a house at, I don't know what the average is anymore, but let's just say it's a $500,000 house, which is, a track home these days in the Denver area, right? And if you're going to be investing that kind of money, it makes sense to invest a couple thousand more just to make sure it's a safe home and you're not going to be upside down and having to get out of the house after moving into it, just a few weeks earlier, which we've heard of those stories.
Right.
And then there's the real estate.
I think it's a good investment.
Yeah.
Right. And the real estate version or the pre-check that you talked about, can you give us an idea of what an average real estate transaction type of property might be, in a 3,000, 2,500, 3,000 square foot home?
For the pre-checks, unless somebody requests additional samples, we'll do those 8 wipes, that's 800 centimeter square, which is not very big. We'll do those 800 centimeter square, and it's a flat rate of, I believe it's, I want to say $650, $675.
Okay. So it's a little bit more affordable, about half the price, but
which
still.
Is why it's so, it's good for the real estate.
But the at-home tests, how accurate are those? If you decide, oh, I'm just going to do it myself and buy it online, how accurate?
I think that if you follow the instructions, I think that they're probably 80%, 85%.
Okay, kind of like a at-home pregnancy test, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, you may get a false positive, you might get a false negative, and it's more to investigate.
Right.
Yeah. Kathy, what you got?
Well, so many questions,
I
Judy.
know.
One other situation that I have come across not too long ago brings to light is multi-unit properties, and not when just people are buying them, but even people are living in them. You know, the neighbor down the hall and transfer, cross contamination through transfer. Can you address that a little bit? Because I've run into people who were sick in their homes. They didn't realize it. Some people have had mold issues, another contaminant for another day. But can you just address multi-units and how what your experiences have been, and potentially what people might want to look for when it comes to a multi-unit home?
Well, you have any of our penetrations through walls or floors or ceilings. If you have a shared heating system, those are notorious for cross-contamination issues. If you have bathroom vents that go through, you know, continually from you're on the first floor and they're on the third floor, or vice versa, that, you know, I like to use the example of if you have a water leak, water goes everywhere. And if you think about it, so does smoke.
Mhm.
It in every crack and crevice, and, you know, just spread itself. Any kind of multifamily, especially with indoor hallway, shared common spaces, we always sample outside of that unit to see how far the contamination has gone outside the unit where we know the problem was.
Mhm.
And, you know, we've ended up cleaning numerous hallways,
Mhm.
you know, trying to prove that it was only that one unit that contaminated the entire hallway. You know,
Yeah.
it's hard to do. You just can't go knock on doors and say, excuse me, I'd like to sample your house for meth. But, you know, every time you open your door, you get anywhere airflow goes, you know, so do the contaminants.
Mhm.
Kind of hard in multifamilies, you know, to, you know, figure out exactly where that contamination is being spread.
I have a question that's a broad scope question. Let's say a homeowner, for some reason, they've gotten sick. They cannot shake it. It is a constant thing. And bringing in someone to do testing on it, how do you know what to test for? I mean, I would assume that you're going to be doing different types of testing.
As far as just indoor air quality.
Yeah. Someone's thinking, you know, I'm wondering if this house is what's making me sick. Are you the type of person that they would call in to say, we don't know what it is, we don't know what's going on, but we just can't shake whatever it is that's going on?
We get those calls. We get at least one or two of those calls a week.
Oh, a week?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Or you get the call, oh, I have this funky smell in my house. You know, those are the ones that I just throw in my hands and go, oh, you know, you can't go for a smell.
Yeah.
So you try and get a what does it smell like
Right.
from them. And believe it or not, the first thing I'll tell people is, did you call public service to check for gas leaks?
Yeah.
And, you know, maybe 5% of the people I tell that to call public service and solve the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, you know, we can go in and sample for mold, we sample for volatile organics. I can sample for anything. You know, people who have spray foam insulation
Mm-hmm.
that, you know, wasn't installed properly. You want to ask them, you have a whole questionnaire worth of questions you ask.
Mm-hmm.
You know, did you do any remodeling? Do we have any new products in the house? Do we have formaldehyde?
Mm-hmm.
You know, the list is endless.
Okay. That's my fear, is that it is endless. Yeah. But obviously somebody with your background and experience, and you have this form to help guide where you're going to be asking questions, but with your experience, you have a pretty good idea of what types of things you need to be testing for.
Yes.
Interesting. Kathy, what else do you have on your list?
I have a question related to remediation, because of the things that I've learned as time went on. The levels were extremely high in my home at the time that it was tested. Get into a little specifics. 9 of the 11 zones that were tested ranged between 69 to 119 with a standard of 0.5. So those are some pretty high levels. And yet I have learned that a home can be remediated, and the word I use, remediated in quotes, could be in different forms, that they met that state standard. But then tell me about post-remediation and possibly the chance that there could still be spots that test hot later. Can you just address that in a little bit in general terms on how that happens potentially?
I can, because it's happened to me and it's happened to, you know, some of my peers. That a house cleared and then somebody comes in, you know, it's being resold 6 months later or a year later, and
Right.
cleared, you know, the state said it was all good. Well, if you think about a room, you know, think about a 20 by 30 living room, kitchen, dining room area, and I'm taking 400 centimeters square. So how many places on your wall have I not sampled?
Right.
How diligent was the cleaning crew that cleaned to clean that upper corner and the upper left, you know, kind of thing. It happens. It's unfortunate. I believe that the contamination can still leach out of the walls, you know, depending on what the levels were when they started. So, you know, hesitate to say, well, yeah, every meth house that has those levels should be gutted. In your case, you had a log home. You know, you can only do so much there.
Right.
But, you know, you can't tell people you need to take all the drywall out of your house or it'll never get clean. But I have found, you know, people trying to sell their home are having this issue, because there's no way that I could really prove to you that your house is clean, that every spot on this wall meets the state standards.
Right.
So it's a challenge that we all face as industrial hygienists, but you know, we do the best that we can following the industry standards. You know, that's all we can do, which is why I think the disclosure issue is so important. So that if, you know, you should test again and make sure those levels are still not there. One instance I had, the entire house was gutted. They put a new HVAC system in. A person buying the house wanted to test it again. And to my surprise, those ducts, brand new ducts put in that house, came back contaminated.
What?
Yep. Because the levels that Colorado has for an area they call that are not meant for habitation, like your crawl space where your HVAC unit goes, get cleaned to a different number. They get cleaned to 4.0, not 0.5.
Right.
Put your new HVAC system down in the base, in the crawl space. Now you're sucking that air that is still somewhat contaminated, and now it spreads through the ducts.
Wow. It dispersed throughout the whole home.
What's that?
Once it dispersed, contaminants dispersed through the whole home when they turned on the HVAC system then.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Which is why, you know, my preference is that the HVAC system get totally torn out when you do it. I don't think they can be adequately cleaned, and that's just my personal opinion. I've sampled a lot of them, and I know I question it every time.
So you're really underscoring the point that if you're going to buy a place, you need to get this tested, because that kind of thing, tearing out the HVAC, is not going to be covered by insurance. We learned that a couple of weeks ago when we had an insurance professional on this talk show, that it's a contaminant. It's an exclusion of most homeowners policies.
Right.
So holy cow, you're talking a lot of money to completely tear out the whole HVAC system if you're wanting to remediate it and live there. So boy, I'm going to go back to a couple $1,000 is a cheap insurance against, you know, giving that peace of mind before you invest hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right. Well, if you think about the HVAC system and they're properly cleaned, and there are a few companies that can actually get them clean, it is a non-porous surface. We're talking about sheet metal. We should be able to get it clean.
Right.
You know, but, you know, I've done camera shots and things of ductwork that supposedly was clean, and when I find the Cheerios and dog food at the bottom of the, bottom of the duck run, I'm like, well, I don't think you really cleaned this very well.
Ay, 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 ay. Okay, so Judy, what bit of advice do you have for our listeners out there?
I would test if you are a landlord, you own investment properties. I would test before and after you have a change of tenants. I would not buy a place without having it tested. If I had my way and could talk every investor into doing a full preliminary before they buy the house, I would. Trying to make things more tolerable, to the purchaser. Came up with the pre-checks. I think testing and informing your tenants, if it's in a rental situation that you are going to be testing, not, you don't trust them, but you're protecting your investment,
right?
Testing, and also relieving them from any liability that there was or was not any contamination in that home.
Yeah. And you just bought a property out of state. You're based in Colorado. You bought a property out of state, and I'm going to ask the question: did you test?
I did.
Okay, and it passed with flying colors, huh?
It did. There's not one drop of meth found in that house.
Awesome. Kathy, any final thoughts that you want to add to this?
Well, I am just so appreciative, Judy, of you bringing your expertise here. I could sit here and chat all afternoon with you and find ways to help bring prevention and awareness, and of course education. I just think that people should take the time to really do their homework, talk to the neighbors, knock on the doors of the areas that they're either looking to rent or buy, get to know the property that they're interested in. Especially what we've all just been through with these last 2 years. It's more about usage, not manufacturing necessarily. It's huge and common, and it's at epidemic proportions is what I've learned. So just get educated, become aware, and get to know the properties that you're looking at to either rent or live, because it may not be the tenant who is in there, like Judy said, get it tested before or after you put a tenant in there, but it may be their guests or their family members. I mean, there's a lot going on here. So thank you, Judy. I know we could spend all afternoon, and we'll have you back if you'll come back.
Sure.
Awesome.
Thank you very much for having me.
And Judy, I say thank you as well for joining us. Doing these is always a pleasure with you, Kathy. For those of you who are watching this, if you're watching on Facebook Live, check out the comment section because we put Judy's website there. We encourage you to reach out to her if you think that she can be of help to you, or at least, if nothing else, guidance if she's not the right person. I have a feeling she'll know who to send you to. And if you're watching this on YouTube or any other post, actually on YouTube, look in the comments section as well, or look in the body of the description, because we're also putting her contact information there. And I thank all of you for watching with us today. We enjoy putting these Toxin Tuesday talk shows out there for you so that we can help educate you on the environmental well-being and keeping you safe and happy and healthy so that you can enjoy your life. And we hope to see you on another Toxin Tuesday talk show.